Good morning. Welcome to today's Map Talk. I'm moving Tucson forward, what the data tells us. I'm Jennifer Poland, the director of the Economic and Business Research Center in the Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona. Today's Map Talk will feature transportation-related data on the map dashboard and how Tucson compares with peer regions around the western U.S. This information will start as a serving point for a discussion that will follow on RTA Next and the transportation data available from PAG. I'm joined today by several guest speakers. We're excited to have several representatives from PEMA Association of Governments joining us today to provide the MAP community with an overview of transportation data and information on what RTA Next means for our community. Those representatives include Jamie Brown, the Director of Strategic Planning, Policy, and Programming, Melanie Lawson, the Public Outreach Director. They're here in a role to answer questions during the Q&A session. Hansu No, a data science administrator who will talk about the transportation data available from PAG, and Michael Ortega, the executive director of PAG, to walk us through information regarding RTA Next and to answer questions during the Q&A session. Also joining us to provide context on why SALC are strong supporters of RTA Next is Christy Street, the senior vice president and CEO of the Southern Arizona Leadership Council. Before we dig into the data, I want to go over a few meeting details. So all MAP talks are recorded, or we'll record today. We'll publish it on the MAP website. It should be up by tomorrow afternoon. We'll also publish the slides there. So the slides that you see from my presentation and from the presenters from PAG will be published there as well. Everyone's in conference mode, meaning that you're muted, except for the presenters and your videos are off. We'll have two Q&A sessions today. The first Q&A session will occur after the PAG presentation on their transportation and RTA Next information. We encourage you to submit all of your questions for PAG during that time. They will be leaving the webinar after that Q&A session. So if you have questions during their presentation, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll moderate that Q&A session and ask those questions to our PAG guest speakers. And then we'll have Christy Street joining us, talking about advocacy for RTA Next as kind of a broader coalition within our region to support RTA Next and why they feel that this is important for our community. You can also email me questions at any time at jknipe@arizona.edu. You're welcome to ask any questions related to the MAP dashboard during either of the Q&A sessions. Before we begin, I'd like to support our sponsors, both our sustaining sponsors and our partners. Our sustaining sponsors, Newpoint Marketing and Market Research, the Thomas R. Brown Family Foundation, and Tucson Electric Power. Our partners include Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, PEMA Association of Governments, the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, the Chamber of Southern Arizona, and the University of Arizona. Their support allows us to have these types of events and provide data and information for our community to make informed decisions. I'd also like to mention our media sponsor, the Arizona Daily Star. We publish both a business and health feature each month on the front page. So look for that on the front page of the health section and the business section each month. And so now we'll start with a conversation about the MAP dashboard data and what that data we have on transportation looks like. So we'll talk about kind of a discussion of where we stand relative to our peer communities and where we're falling behind. And we cover a wide range of topics in our infrastructure category on the MAP dashboard, including air travel, congestion trends, energy use, internet access, residential water use, and transportation to work. Today, I'm going to focus on just the transportation-related indicators, and those include congestion costs and transportation to work. I did want to mention that in our recent review of how Tucson has fared over the past decade, we did several articles on measuring Tucson over the past decade. We had several indicators in our infrastructure category that really stood out. One of those you see here with a star. This infographic is from one of those articles, and you see that congestion cost has a star, and you're going to see why in a minute, but it's an area that Tucson is really strong. We've had tremendous reduction in costs over the years, as you'll see, and we do really well relative to our peer communities, but also areas that we've done really well in infrastructure, air travel, internet access, transportation to work, and again, that congestion cost. So infrastructure is a really strong strong component for our region relative to our peers. I encourage you to explore all of those articles if you haven't. We have an article for each of our categories, our economy, education, infrastructure, workforce and demographics, health and social well-being, that reviews how Tucson's done over the past decade. So we're going to start here with our congestion cost data. And the infographic that I just showed you, when we published that, we only had 2022 data available for congestion costs per auto commuter. We ranked the best among our peer communities at that time, and we were well below our pre-pandemic costs. And so we just updated this data last week. It just became available. And so again, we see that Tucson ranks really well relative to our peer communities. These are the peer communities that we measure against all of our core indicators on the map dashboard. For congestion costs, these are urban areas. We typically look at metropolitan areas on the map dashboard, but in this case, the data is for urban areas. So that's just a smaller region. Metropolitan areas are measured at the county level, where urban areas are more where your large population base is. And you can see here, congestion costs in 2024 were $915 per auto commuter. That was the lowest among all of our peer metros. The U.S. urban area average is just under $1,500 there at $1,480. We did see a small reduction in our annual congestion costs between 2023 and 2024, about $19. That dropped by about $19. You'll see that on a slide later where we look at the trend data. There was a little bit of an increase between 2022 and 2024, though we saw a couple $100 increase. And again, you'll see that on the trend slide in just a moment. So congestion costs are calculated from two components. The value of extra travel time, that's known as delay, and we'll look at delay hours in a moment, and excess fuel consumed by those vehicles traveling at slower speeds. Congestion costs vary significantly from other congestion indicators like delay because there's a large variation in fuel across states. And so example, in 2024, the average state fuel cost in Arizona was $4.13, while in California it was $5.46. The value of time component here is held consistent across all urban areas for a given year. So there is a calculation of that extra time that you sit in traffic, but that is a consistent calculation, a consistent value across all of our states and urban areas. So something we don't currently have, we have all of this information currently on the map, but something that we don't have, and I was interested in while I was putting this talk together, is how do we compare pre-pandemic? And the reason I was thinking about this is because congestion, commute time, we'll talk about later, different modes of transportation were really impacted during the pandemic, right? So we saw people working from home, increase in work from home rates, less people going into work, less people just driving around during peak hours, doing leisure activities or going to the store. So I wanted to really look at, what does it look like compared to pre-pandemic to now? And so I've graphed this based on percent change. And so we can see that there are four urban areas that still remain, their congestion costs remain below their pre-pandemic levels. Tucson is one of them, about just under 2% less than what we were paying per auto commuter in 2019. The three Texas urban areas that we explore on the map dashboard are also still well below their pre-pandemic congestion costs. You can see they're at 9% to 5% lower. And after that, you can see huge increases in congestion costs across the other urban areas. The U.S. urban area average is about 18% higher. Salt Lake City at almost 60% higher than what they were paying per auto commuter in 2019. And here's that trend data that I referred to. You can see that sharp decline during the pandemic where congestion costs fell significantly. That's due to less commuters on the road, less people going into work, so less people just driving around during that peak time. And you can see that Tucson is just sitting still below its pre-pandemic congestion cost value. It's just slightly below. We just mentioned a couple of, I think it was $15 or $17 below. But we did see that. You can see also that increase, a couple $100 increase that we saw between 2022 and 2024 there, and the end of the orange line, which represents Tucson. we see Phoenix and the U.S. urban areas well above their pre-pandemic congestion costs. Now is a good time to mention all of the graphs on the map dashboard are interactive. So if you go to the map website and you visit this graph and this core indicator, you can click on and off all of these different geographies, and that data will appear on the graph. And just in the upper right-hand corner of the graph is like, we call it a hamburger menu. It's 3 lines. You can click on that line, those lines, and you can get a drop-down menu that will allow you to save this as an image or to download the data. And we encourage you, download the data, use the data on the map dashboard. This is a resource for our community to help you make better informed decisions. And so go download the data, use our visualizations in your presentations and your reports. And so here's our delay hour graph. And so these are the extra hours that someone spends sitting in traffic due to congestion. Delay can be for a variety of reasons. It could be traffic accidents, bad weather, road construction. And so it's the time spent traveling at less than free flow speeds by private vehicle drivers and passengers in typical peak periods. And those peak periods occur between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. and 3 and 7 p.m. So in Tucson, we saw that the Tucson urban area had the 4th lowest number of delay hours per commuter at 50 hours. Overall, the U.S. urban area average is around 63 annual delay hours per commuter. We saw San Diego at the highest at 88 and El Paso at 34. So I did that same kind of analysis where we looked at pre-pandemic to now. And here we can see that Tucson has exactly the same number of delay hours in 2024 as it did in 2019. So pre-pandemic, sitting at 50 hours. There tends to be a little less variation in this indicator than congestion costs, since fuel can vary pretty significantly. Fuel costs can vary pretty significantly. We do see those 3 Texas our urban areas still have less delay hours than they did pre-pandemic. And while we have some increases across the other urban areas, San Diego having the largest increase at 24 additional hours. And so someone that lives in San Diego can expect to have each year 88 delay hours because of bad weather, congestion, traffic accidents, and so on. And so here we also, in addition to congestion costs, we explore commute time and mode of transportation. And these 2 indicators tell us how people get to work. And so here is our commute time. We can see this graph. We only have commute time available on the map dashboard for the U.S., Arizona, and Tucson. And you can see that trend. Tucson's been pretty consistent. It's below the U.S. average. It's below the Phoenix or the Arizona average, which is really being driven by Phoenix mostly there at 25.5 minutes. You can see Phoenix over here, 26.5 minutes in 2023. A little bit of an increase in the last 23 years in Tucson, where we were just below 24 minutes, and now we sit just above 24 minutes. And so here I pulled out all of the MSA data because this is now MSA level data. So this includes the entire Pima County region for Tucson. For Phoenix, that would include both Maricopa and Pinal County. And so this MSA data looking at how it ranks, how Tucson stacks up. And so we have the 4th lowest among those MSAs at 24.4 minutes. And we see, Austin and Denver up there at just over 27.3 minutes. I think it's important to mention at this time that the commute data and the mode of transportation data that we include on the map dashboard comes from the Census Bureau's ACS 5-year estimates. So this data is still capturing what we saw during the pandemic. And there are certain indicators that we explore on the map dashboard that were significantly impacted during the pandemic. Commute time, mode of transportation, those are 2 indicators where we saw substantial differences in 2020 compared to the years prior and the years after. And so this time period runs right now from 2019 to 2023. The reason we use 5-year estimates on the map dashboard is because we want to be able to explore the data across all of our different geographies. So some of our Arizona counties are too small to have 1-year estimates available. So in order to compare to our Arizona counties, we have to use 5-year estimates. If we were to look at the 1 year estimates, I think this would tell a slightly different story because it wouldn't be including all of that information and data in there from during the pandemic. We may see slightly different numbers here. And that's, I mentioned that because you'll see different numbers across different websites. And this is one of the reasons why. Are they using 5 year estimates? Are they using 1 year estimates? Are they using a completely different data source than the Census Bureau? And so here is our data on mode of transportation. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the percentage that drove alone. And in Tucson, we had the eighth highest percent of those that drove alone among our peer communities at 70.7%. So we tend to think of the lower, the better on this measure, right? The less people that are driving alone and using other means to get to work help reduce congestion on our roadways. So Portland had that lowest rate, but El Paso had the highest. Driving alone is the primary mode of transportation to work for most Americans. Other modes include bicycling, walking, carpooling, public transportation. All of those have potential to reduce congestion and mitigate the impact of driving alone has on the roadways. So we track all of that data on the map dashboard. We track it for all of our metropolitan areas, all of our counties, all of the state data. I've just pulled out the US, Arizona, and Tucson data here, and then I've put next to those bars how we ranked relative to our peer communities. And so you can see that Tucson reported the second highest rate of those commuting to work by bicycle at 1%. It's a really small percentage, but we are second among our peer communities. We do have great infrastructure for commuting to work by bicycle, the loop, and all of the shared use lanes that we have on our roadway. So Portland is first here. And then we see that Tucson has the fifth highest rate of walking at 1.9%, sixth at public transportation at 1.6% utilizing public transportation. Other mode, also sixth, that would include individuals taking a taxi or Uber to work. Sixth at carpooling, so about 10% carpooling to work. And then work from home, we're eighth at 13.8%. And again, it's important to mention that this data is still reflecting that large percentage of individuals that we saw working from home in 2020. And so this is, again, a 5-year survey over 2019 to 2023. So that is all the data that I have prepared on transportation and how the Tucson region is doing relative to our peers. If you have any questions about this data, you can ask them during either of the Q&A sessions. And I'd now like to welcome our guest speakers from Pima Association of Governments to discuss their transportation data, provide an overview of provide an educational overview of RTA Next. And so now I ask Michael to turn on his screen. Michael is the executive director of Pima Association of Governments. He joined PAG in June 16th of 2025. In working with its members, PAG conducts transportation, environmental, and economic vitality planning for the region. The RTA board recently approved a $2.67 billion 20-year regional transportation plan that is scheduled to go to vote for consideration in March 2026. Michael's here to help us understand what RTA Next means for our community and to allow our MAP community to ask questions about RTA Next to help to make an informed decision on that. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. I will share my screen if that's okay and
please.
go through this presentation quickly here. There we go. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. What I'll do today is just give you an overview of the RTA Next plan as it's been presented or was approved by the RTA board, and then will be presented to the voters for consideration along with a funding mechanism, which is a half-cent sales tax on March 10th. So first of all, the RTA is made up of 9 members, and you can see those on the screen. They're basically all the jurisdictions within Pima County for the sole purpose of providing funding for a long-range transportation plan or a 20-year transportation plan. Currently, that revenue is about $125 million annually. So you can see We have the tribe, we have the nation, we have the municipalities, we have the county, and we also have an ADOT representative as well. That is the State Transportation Board member that's appointed by the governor to serve to represent this area, this region, is also on the board. So these are some pictures of some of the investments from the original RTA, from the 2006 RTA, that really kind of encapsulates what the RTA plan and the RTA improvements will do for the community. You can see they include roadway, they include transit, and not just bus routes and fixed bus routes and like bus stops, but also paratransit and dial-a-ride. Also investments in pedestrian, bicycle. You can see the Hawk, the crossing there down on the lower part of the screen there. So you can see it's a very broad transportation investment that the RTA really looks at going forward. So what does it mean and what does it do? I think I won't read you all the slides, all the points in the slide here, but I will bring your attention to the safety. And safety is mentioned a couple of times here. If you think of it, it basically is improvements to the safety of the entire region's transportation system. And so the key is even if you don't drive a car, even if you only drive a bicycle or you only drive a car, the entirety of the transportation system is important to keep you safe, but also to get you from point A to point B. I like to use the example of even if you don't use vehicles or don't use, quote, the roadway, chances are good that when you go to the grocery store, virtually everything on those shelves got there via truck, via the transportation system. But it also includes, how folks enjoy their quality of life through pedestrian enhancements or improvements, as well as bicycle improvements as well. And so it's the opportunity to provide the movement of folks across the entirety of the region for all purposes, school, medical, work, just pick it. So what is the Regional Transportation Authority? We'll call it the tax, the funding. What does that look like in terms of the entirety of the region? So the region currently gets about $54 million a year in what we'll call regional funding. And those are dollars that are specifically allocated to the Pima County region. And you can see the two sources there. There's state funding, that's the orange, and the federal funding in blue. In addition to that, our local tax, our local half-cent sales tax, which is currently collected by the RTA, brings in about $126 million. So when you look at the entirety of the region, about 2/3 of it is from the RTA or from the Regional Transportation Authority. Now, it's important to think about that for a minute because, in essence, 2/3 of those revenue streams or that revenue stream is from local taxes, which means there's local decisions that go along with how those dollars are expended. The state and the feds, they have their own rules, they have their own strings. And there are things that we would like to do with those monies that we can't because we're prohibited. However, the Regional Transportation Authority, because we go to the voter and it's part of the conversation around what's in the plan, in the RTA plan, it gives us an opportunity to really chart our own destiny. And so the rules are established by the voter here in Pima County. So what does it look like if this goes away? So if you look at the picture, kind of a graphic, you can see how much of an impact that has when 2/3 of our region's funding basically goes away. So why do we need this? And this was a conversation that started 20 years ago in 2006 when the RTA went to the voter and successfully got a plan and funding source approved. The arguments, the discussions haven't changed. In essence, there's been no gas tax increase for over 30 years now. With the rise of fuel efficient vehicles, the gas tax revenues, the money that's actually used for road improvement or any kind of infrastructure within the transportation footprint, it has decreased. And so keep in mind that a sales tax is transactional, right? And a gas tax is, but it's based on the number of gallons sold, not based on the cost of gas, not based on the price. And so as a result, we have a decline in how much money we have available, the resources we have available for transportation improvements. So a sales tax, who pays for that? And I think that's an important piece. So it's basically any transaction that occurs, any sales transaction that occurs within the region. So you can see the list there on the screen, pretty straightforward. But I do want to draw your attention to the fact that it does not include grocery or pharmaceutical items because those are tax exempt. So it's all retail sales, but for the grocery and pharmaceutical items across the board. The conversation now is with the voter, March 10th, and it's really an opportunity for the voter to weigh in and decide, do they want to continue to pay the same in tax rate going forward? Currently, all Pima County transactions are taxed at half a cent. And the question really is, do you want that to continue to fund the improvements in the plan? And I'll get into the plan here in a minute. But basically, that's the question. And so there's not an additional cost to the taxpayer. It's basically the same exact amount that folks are paying today, they would pay after the election if it's approved. So there's 5 elements within the RTA Next plan. I'll spend a quick few minutes on each. The roadway corridors, there's 31 new projects, 8 of which are capacity improvements, 23 of which are basically improving the safety of aging infrastructure. So we use the term modernization, but people kind of scratch their heads at that. But in essence, it's adding bike lanes, adding pedestrian corridors or pedestrian facilities, but also bus pullouts, really going through those corridors and making sure that they are safe and much safer than they are today. Now, keep in mind that there are an additional 7 projects that are included in the roadway element that are part of RTA 1, that are part of the 2006 RTA plan. 5 of those are rescope projects. In essence, those are projects that we have identified, we in the region, not just we as RTA, but the jurisdictional partners have identified and said, we really need to go back to the voter and have a conversation about changes to the original scope. So for example, North First Avenue was scoped in the original plan to be a 6-lane divided roadway. Well, after many analyses that were done within the city of Tucson, as well as within PAG itself, we've determined that a 4-lane section is all that's necessary. When we went out and had conversation with the public feedback was overwhelming that we don't need 6 lanes. We don't want 6 lanes. We want 4 lanes. And so the conversation is, how do we do that? Well, in order to make a change like that, we have to go back to the voters. So that's one example. Another example is 22nd Street between Keno Road and I-10. Same basic thing. It was scheduled or scoped to be a 6-lane divided roadway. After review and analysis and public feedback, we now know that it's 4 lanes is all that's necessary. So that's what's on the revised plan, if you will. So there's 5 projects that are like that the scopes in essence have been reduced based on current demand, based on what we know is necessary today. Now, there are 2 projects, Tangerine Road and Grant Road, that need additional funding. Because of the pandemic, because of the Great Recession, we saw a reduction in what we had projected as our budget of over $1 billion. That's $1 billion less revenue. And so we've got to make that up. There's just no way that we tried everything. We allocated regional funding, we allocated other funds, just no way to do it without asking for additional funds for those roads. So in essence, those 7 projects are, we'll call them carryover from the 2006 RTA plan. The next category is safety, ADA, and active transportation. As you might know or be aware, active transportation is basically every other aspect of transportation other than motorized. So it's pedestrian, bicycle, ADA, any other way to get around that is not necessarily motorized. However, it also includes safety components at intersections, but also corridors like hawks, toucans, basically on-demand crossing of major roadways, We know that those are reduction based on a U of A study, actually. We know that there is a reduction in pedestrian crashes of 50% when we install a hawk at a location. And so there's an opportunity for us to expand and implement even more hawks and safety improvements across the entire of the region, as well as bike and pedestrian improvements. So the arterial and collector roads is a new category that was not in the RTA, the previous RTA, and that's a direct relationship between the feedback we got and the new plan, if you will. So as we went out and let people know, hey, this is what we're thinking about in terms of the plan. What do y'all think? There was an overwhelming response that says, look, our roads are in bad shape and we need to get some money invested in them. So the board took note and asked us to include $177 million for pavement rehabilitation. So there's a couple things that I want to point out on that. One is it's for the main roads. It's not for the neighborhood roads. There's other sources of funding for those that the jurisdictions are actually using. But this is for arterial and collectors. So these are main corridors, main roadways. But the second part of it is that it's not going to go out and fill a pothole necessarily. What it's going to do is reconstruct the pavement with a 10-year life as a minimum. And that's really important because it's not a maintenance of that road. It's totally reconstructing those roads and those pavements, if you will, that are falling apart today. So pretty excited about that as an opportunity for us moving forward. Environmental or wildlife linkages. There's $50 million in the plan for the environmental component or environmental element. That is not just fencing and we'll call them bridges for wildlife, but it's also to enhance culverts, drainage culverts, to make sure as we're going through and doing our design that the opportunity for wildlife to use and cross those roads and those corridors safely is incorporated into the project design. Keep in mind that this became a pretty hot topic for us because what we found was that people were obviously interested in making sure that wildlife weren't damaged or weren't hurt along the corridors, but they were also concerned about the driver as well. Their kids, their grandkids. The feedback that we got was, look, we need to make sure that the wildlife is safe, but we also need to make sure that the driver is safe as well. And then transit. Transit is at $726 million in the plan. It includes, as mentioned on the slide there, paratransit. So it's a dial-a-ride, paratransit, and enhancement to the fixed routes. So again, that's a big investment, $726 million. When you leverage that with other monies that we've identified, we're right at about 950 million. So just shy of $1 billion will be invested in transit going forward. Some of the questions that I've received is about the safety. There is a $51 million allocation within that element specifically for safety. I know the city of Tucson has been working through ideas and thoughts on how they're going to address some of or how they're going to be able to use those dollars to enhance safety on some of their system and with their system improvements. Oops, that tells me that that's 15 minutes. So I guess I'm going to have to go a little faster here. So I'll wrap that piece up, basically just saying that that safety component will be yet to be determined. But I will tell you that it will include things like security on buses, security at bus stops. Those are things that I've seen on the plan, as well as lighting and shelter at the bus stops. So I already mentioned the feedback, so I'll keep moving forward on that. Jennifer, I know you need to get this thing moving. So what I'll do is suggest that these maps that are here, folks can download them. It really just outlines what the projects are. So I won't spend time on them. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, if that's okay.
Mike, we have a few extra minutes if you'd like, if
Okay.
there's things you'd like to discuss. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. So I'll go back to this slide only because I think it's important. It gives you a snapshot of the roadway improvements. And what I want to draw your attention to here are those 7 projects that I mentioned from RTA 1. Those are those blue bubbles there. The differentiation between the blue dash, the light blue dash on the southern end, that's the Sonora corridor. That's a study. That's not a road improvement. That's basically to analyze opportunity to get folks from I-19 to I-10 more efficiently than currently is going on. Uh, Overall map of bike and ped improvements across the region. You can see what's both under construction, underway, and what's been completed. Pretty good snapshot. You can see it's very focused on the urban core, which I think if you look at the plan, it does differentiate the urban core from the suburban areas, and puts investment and the diversity of the plan allows that investment to be where needed and address the needs that are in that area or those areas. Again, signalized pedestrian crossings. I mentioned the Hawk before. So very quickly, here are some of the opportunities or the successes from the 20 years to this point. Pretty self-explanatory. People have asked, and I think one of the questions is, where did we get these numbers? We actually hired Rounds Consulting to help us with the job creation, job loss, as well as the we'll call it the leveraged amount, both on the public and private sector from a public investment here. I will tell you just one little tidbit here. We recently were looking through some data and found that with the streetcar downtown, just that one improvement of about $88 million of investment from the RTA and the original chemistry of that plan has translated into over $4 billion in private investment along that corridor. So that's just one example of where using public money will give you and obviously leverage that private investment. RTA Next, here's what we're projecting. We will have in the RTA Next, the 48,000 jobs, 3.7 billion. And by the way, that Rounds Consulting group did the same thing for us. If RTA Next does not pass, the loss of 54,000 jobs and the 3.5 billion in loss. And that is online. You can go to the RTA website, and we've got a link to it there. You're more than welcome to take a look at that and review it. So what happens if it doesn't pass? I think that we could see some cuts in service and the traffic congestion. I know Hansu is going to talk about that here in a minute. Commute times, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the big piece of that is the vulnerable communities that currently rely upon some of our transit services could be at risk there. Last big thing I have to say for you is, what's different now versus before. I think the accountability is important. I think that in order for a plan to be ultimately approved by the voter, we have to make sure that there is public accountability for its implementation. And so on a very regular basis, quarterly, the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, a citizens group, will have oversight of both finances and schedules, and will present to the board their report, their analysis of that, along with recommendations. That will also come from the Technical Management Committee. That's a group of the jurisdictions, basically their top technical folks, and making, again, recommendations to the RTA board in a public setting, because that's really ultimately where the decisions are made. Folks are held accountable by the RTA board, and we've got to make sure that that information is very public, very open, so that we have no question. And if there is a challenge or there is something that we're foreseeing as a problem, that the board can make decisions at that point to potentially make changes. This is the last slide. It's a plan for everyone. As I mentioned, that QR code actually has the RTA Next plan. It looks very similar to this. You can go through it in detail. On the plan, I've been asked about development paying for itself and why are we doing it for developers and so forth. Actually, if you look at the plan, there is a column there that says committed non-RTA dollars. And basically that funding is from impact fees, from developments, from other sources. So when you look at that, you'll see the RTA funding, the committed non-RTA funding, and then the totals for those projects and those and the entirety of the program. That concludes my presentation. Sorry I went over there, Jennifer and team, but happy to answer questions as you see fit.
That sounds great, Mike. Let's hold questions until after Hansu's presentation on transportation, if that's okay. And we'll do the transportation, kind of the PAG question answer session combined.
Sounds great.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. And now welcome Hansu No from PAG to present different transportation data that they have available.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And good morning, everyone. My name is Hyun-Soo No. I serve as a data scientist, science administrator here at PAC, leading the PAC data science team. And our team supports several federally mandated responsibilities, including travel and traffic modeling that informs the PAC's long and short range transportation plans, RMAP MTF. We also provide data development, analysis, and modeling data science services for PAC, RTA, and our jurisdictional partners and stakeholders. Building on Mike's presentation on RTA Next, and you, Jennifer, as well, and the map dashboard update, I'd like to discuss how data science contributes to RTA Next by providing meaningful, quantifiable insights, particularly for congestion, travel time, and safety. Today, I'd like to answer, and here are three questions. Why is data science essential for RTA Next? What types of pack modeling and data sets are available to support it? And finally, I will share a few examples from recent RTA Next modeling work, along with a look ahead at how we plan to continue integrating flexible, accountable, data-driven approaches moving forward. Why data science? And to support regional transportation plans, including RTNX, our primary role is to understand the current regional travel patterns, accurately replicate them in our modeling tools, and this allows us to evaluate the future value of regional investments and using meaningful data-driven outcomes grounded in robust data procurement, development, management, and analytical modeling to assess and improve the regional transportation system. And we continuously track the key indicators such as housing development, employment locations, trip origins and destinations, travel times, traffic delays, and arrival and green percentage, transit reliability, traffic and pedestrian bike volumes, and the crash data. These data sets help us measure system performance and identify opportunities for meaningful improvements. Now, I'd like to just provide a high-level overview and PAC's modeling framework. And PAC data science team maintains three major models that forms the backbone of our regional analysis capabilities. Land use model, we currently maintain SAM, survey area allocation model, and we are in the process of transitioning to our just a new advanced urban SIM model. The next, the travel demand model has recently developed and now operates a new accurate-based model, and plus and the DTA, dynamic traffic assignment model. For more detailed operational analysis, the DTA simulates individual vehicle movements on a roadway network that closely replicates the real-world conditions. Air quality modeling, and for regional air quality conformity, and we maintain the EPA MOVES model. We also support numerous models and methodologies and specialized modules for data science application using AI and the machine learning algorithms. Here's a quick example, and so how the land use model and the travel demand model work together for regional planning. And so this is the one example just that we applied for RTA Next. The flow chart on the right top corner, you see that the land use model, the SAM, and which allocates the future housing units and jobs using current transportation networks and adopted land use patterns. Then the travel demand model on the bottom left, and then assigns the trip patterns generated by estimated population, employments to the roadway network. The result of TDM and feedback into the land use model for the next year allocation. This cycle continues until the final planning horizon year is reached, producing consistent and integrated forecasts. On the left side, outside of the dashed line box, you see that and the key inputs that drive this process and the regional population, employment growth assumptions, existing and forecasted land use data, new and development projects and redevelopment forecasts, and the transportation network, and which also includes in the RTA Next project for our example we're going to share later. Tech data and analysis. This slide provides an overview of a major data products used by the PEC data science team. For land use and the socioeconomic data, we collect general spatial plans, building permit data, our jurisdictional partners provided, and population estimates, projections in coordination with Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity, and we maintain in-house employment database that also supports updates to the state employment database. For multimodal traffic data, we collect and traffic counts. Recently completed a project that identified multimodal traffic data sets and developed associated performance measures, including our jurisdictional partners, advanced traffic sensor data such as MyVision and the MaxView. We also incorporate and GPS-based connected vehicle data and freight data, as well as crowdsourced data. Travel behavior insights, and we have conducted recently a regional household travel survey, and we regularly use location-based crowdsourced data, travel demand model performance measures, and Title VI analysis. We'd like to just improve and better understanding travel patterns and the equity impacts included. For air quality analysis, we collect state registered vehicle data and apply analytical tools and methods and developed and support for conformity requirements. For safety analysis, we collect Arizona state crash data and develop performance measures and analytical products that support the regional safety planning. To support all modeling, data development, and the system maintenance, PEC data science team consists of a highly skilled group of professionals, 3 PhDs, 3 masters, and 2 bachelors, in specializing in transportation engineering and planning, applied economics, mathematics, and geography. So moving on, and main example in the RTA Next modeling side, data-driven RTA Next. Based on 2055 RMAP PAC's long-range transportation plan, we developed 2046 RTA Next model with the scenarios of base year 2024, no build scenario without RTA Next, and build scenario with the RTA Next. Build scenario with the RTA Next includes a transportation network improvement, including road extension, roadway expansion, road diet, and transit service changes. We can have more than 30 different performance measures, including 20 miles, accessibility, congestion, and commute time. Here is an example of the trip mode share for the scenarios base year with the RTNX, the build scenario, and without RTNX, no build scenario. The chart provides the base year auto trips roughly 3.7 million and forecast year around 4.2 million trips for both build and no build scenarios. Then followed by works and the other mode shares, kind of is the marginal in base and the forecast years. So similarly, likely just as Jennifer mentioned, and I'd like to talk about and how we estimate the delay forecast year 2046. Delay is just simply and defined as here, congest time minus the free flow time. Typically, we highlight in the peak hours, AM peak and the afternoon peak PM. Like a typical timing, like a 6:30 a.m. to just 8:30 a.m. for AM peak. Afternoon peak, we assume that 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So according to our just comparison and the build scenario, no build scenario, and the daily peak hour savings roughly around 6,000 hours. And plus just the annualized, like a factor applied, then annual peak hour savings roughly 2 million. hours of delay. And if you want to just look at more detail, and you can see here in the comparing no build scenario and the build scenario, and all the way just to right in the column, you see that the savings. So as mentioned, and the total and the delay, the saved during peak hours, 6,000, and annualized is 2 million on the savings. And over here, the average delay and literally like a minute by vehicle, each vehicle trip. And it's actually just the marginal and the savings. But keep in mind and aggregate all just the 2046 and the vehicle trips and the auto vehicle trips a little more than 4 million. Then it will be around like a 4 hours per vehicle trip, the savings and annualized. So which is similar, but again, keep in mind and the model different, network representation is different, and we didn't count those in the local neighborhood roles, and the geographical boundary is also different. Um, and moving on, and let's just look at the project level and the service. So to do this, we first need to understand the concept of LOS, the project level LOS. I will use the volume over capacity ratio. In simple terms, given a roadway capacity, congestion increase as the traffic volume approaches or exceeds that capacity. So simply I'm bringing here two. On the right side and the figure, you can see LOS grades from the top, the A level of service A, on the bottom, like F in red. LOS-A represent the free flow conditions. LOS-A through C, generally considered stable traffic conditions. LOS-D indicates the point at which traffic flows becomes noticeably affected, even though and still stable. LOS-E and the LOS-E reflect unstable flow, where speeds are significantly reduced and conditions may include a stop and go movement. LOS-F represent the forced or breakdown flow, where speeds are very low and congestion is severe. On the left side and the table and the corresponding VC ratios at each LOS category are shown here. And the VC ratio up to 0.6 represent the free flow conditions, LOS-A, LOS-B, and C generally correspond to VC ratios up to 0.7 and 0.8. And when the VC ratio exceeds and 1.0, the roadways is operating at the LOS-F. With this background, and let's review and the individual 2046 RTA Next projects. 6 projects are shown here as examples. Project 3 and the Lambeth Lane, and you see that and comparing without RTA Next and with RTA Next and the percent improvement of a VC ratio. So project 3, and which is one of the project and the RTA project, RTA Next. Then see that in the morning AM peak improved 48%, PM 45%, and moving to the project 10, Valencia Road, and as you see that LOS and the corresponds to VC ratio roughly 0.9, and AM and the PM 0.86 in the PM afternoon peak. But with RTA Next, and you see that the improvement to 24% and 25% AM and PM respectively. Project 12, Pima Mine Road, this project does not show a VC ratio improvement, and because no additional roadway capacity is being added. Instead, the improvement focus on realignment. So it actually bring more in the volumes. So that's actually just a good sign, even though the percent improvement shows the negative numbers. Let's look further and highlighting like a Valencia Road. What does it mean like as a VC ratio changes in terms of RTA Next? If voters approve RTA Next, the congestion on this segment of Valencia Road and during peak commute times will be drastically reduced. The current, your service, and at the time, like the 2046, the level of service E and without RTNX. And with RTNX, you can expect the level of service B. So using this modeling, we can do furthermore and about travel time analysis. So we actually use that 2046 build model and with RTNX improvements, both AM and PM peak periods. Reason why the average commute time is roughly estimated 22 minutes. Again, just to keep in mind, and the model assumption is a different, actually, just it's not really apple to apple comparison when you compare and just the present, the collected data, and Jennifer actually presented. But this is the meaningful and the same like a ballpark and in the forecast year 2046, which is even with an anticipated population increase approximately 100,000 people over the next 20 years. Travel times can also be examined at the individual location level. For example, here the contour map and it shows the 5-minute travel time bands for commuters traveling to University of Arizona during the morning peak period. As shown, most of the Tucson metropolitan area falls within a 30-minute commute band. These travel time bands will help and illustrate how the RTNX project improve the accessibility from each location when combined with other additional data, such as the job density or the distribution of healthcare services. We can evaluate job accessibility and access to essential services across the region. Here, the examples, and if you live around like Oro Valley, I think just the point and address here, the Lambert Lane and the La Cañada. So the RTA with RTA Next project, you can easily access to just the I-10 further within 15-minute time band. So this, if you live around like a retail ranch, and again, like especially for in the afternoon, the get to that and the point and the retail ranch start here. You can easily get to retail ranch and through the actual I-10 and accessible all the way and east of I-10. You can further up and most of just the region and the covered within 40 minutes. If you live in around like a Catalina foothills and AM travel time is very stable and service is provided here, you can access most of just the area and within 30 minutes time band. Regional safety data and analysis. PAC monitors regional safety performance through the Safety Explorer and the Performance Measure dashboard, the PM dashboard, both of which track safety metrics and trends. First, in the PAC Safety Explorer, it integrates all crash records and reported to the state of Arizona, and the users can explore crash severity, crash types, and the spatial and temporal trends. You can see that all the dots, and as well as like a different crash types, number of crashes, injuries, the by jurisdiction, and all the details. The tool also incorporates and safety performance functions and to estimate expected crash frequencies based on AADT and segment length, and LOS, S, and the level of service of safety is actually derived from that the SPF outputs crash frequencies expected. To evaluate safety improvements, the tool also applies and the crash modification factors, CMFs, as adjustment factors when assessing the impact of potential countermeasures. Then PAC, the PM dashboard, and reports safety performance measures required under federal requirements, and including the FAST Act and the BIL, IIJA, and performance measures. We also monitors and we developed and the ART map and our long-range transportation performance measures, which is actually includes and the benchmark and as well as just a long-term the target. Ongoing work. To continue monitoring system performance, PAC will maintain regional transportation performance and the tracking, including key RTNX project corridors. This includes metrics such as traffic delay, arrival on-green percentage, transit reliability, pedestrian bike volumes, and crash trends. We are prepared and just shared and one of the modeling effort regarding RTA Next. We are prepared to implement strategic scenario development and evaluation using modeling tools and methodologies described earlier to assess, and emerging and flexible alternatives. PAC's long-range and short-range transportation plans remain closely aligned with RTA initiatives. As such, models and tools will continue to support the regional transportation improvement efforts moving forward. So this is all I have, and I'm actually handing over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Hansu. Thank you, Mike. Mike, if you want to turn on your screen now, we can go through the questions. Thank you both for those presentations. I really enjoyed learning more about RTNX and kind of the information behind it and the data behind it. And we have lots of great questions. I'm going to start with one that was emailed to me. And I think, Mike, you touched on this a little bit. And this is, I don't know if you want to expand a little, but the first question is, to whom are the upper level administrators accountable for with RTA Next?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. So the ultimate folks that hold everyone accountable is the RTA board. The RTA board is made up of elected officials, the chief elected officials throughout the entirety of the region. So it's basically the mayors and other chief officials, the chairman of the chair folks of the tribe and of the nation. And also keep in mind, we have instituted this community for accountability, or I always mess up the name, community. It's a committee for accountability for regional transportation. And so that citizens group is really the oversight. And they're the ones that they're not reporting in the reporting structure to the executive director. They're directly to the board, and their reporting is in a public setting. So I think that there's adequate pieces that we've instilled and we put into the code. And by the way, that's memorialized now. That's codified now as a part of the RTA Next plan that will happen.
Okay, can you speak a little bit about how that citizen group will be structured? Who will make up that citizen group?
Yeah, great question as well. So the citizens group has representatives from each of the jurisdictions and 4 from the city of Tucson. And so the city of Tucson has an opportunity to appoint 4 members. All the other jurisdictions have 1 member, basically. And one of them has to be an advocate for transit. So there is a piece in there that's specific for transit. But then also all the jurisdictions have an opportunity to appoint those citizen folks to help us with that oversight.
Great, thank you. I'll go to the Q&As now that have come in during the presentation, and there's a variety of topics, so we'll just I'll try to group them a little bit. First is, are there concerns about safety? Are there plans in RTA Next to address safety on the buses?
Sure. So as I mentioned in my presentation, the entirety of the plan is about safety. More specific, there is concern about safety, and that was brought up during the development of the plan. And that's really where that $51 million that's in the plan came from. And so the idea is to work with our jurisdictional partners. It'll be mostly the city of Tucson to identify how best to deploy those resources. I know that they've had a study session at the mayor and council level talking about some of the things that they're considering, which, as I mentioned, security on the buses, security at the bus stops, additional lighting at bus stops, additional shelter, if you will, for folks that are using the buses. So absolutely, there are concerns about it. I believe that there are improvements that will be forthcoming as a part of RTA Next.
Okay. I have another question here. It starts with that they're pro RTA Next as there's their organization, but they'd like to work on messaging to address some of the opposition points that have been raised. And so 2 questions based on that, on the recent opposition, is does this plan have safeguards to avoid the financial problems from RTA 2006, the Great Recession plus COVID, creating less revenue plus massive inflation, leading to that $1 billion shortfall. And then the second is, how do you address arguments that jurisdictions could do the same tax and focus on their individual priorities and values?
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to address those separately because they're really two different components to the conversation. So, first of all, going back to the Great Recession and COVID and all the things that went on, when we were coming out of that, we were all pretty optimistic, right? We all thought, hey, don't worry, we're going to make it up. It's going to be fine. But the hit that it took was so great that we just never made it up. Well, obviously, lesson learned, right? But I go back to the importance of that accountability on that quarterly reporting that comes from both that citizens oversight group and the technical management committee directly to the board is going to keep us on track, because that review is not just, hey, how are we doing thus far? That review is how are we doing thus far, and what does it look like for the entirety of the program? So every quarter, the board will get a snapshot of how the rest of the program is going. And so, for example, let's say that we find a challenge based on those projections in the 12th year, but we're in the second year, right? Then there's an opportunity to have a very open discussion like, okay, how do we address that? We know it's coming, right? We know that there's an opportunity for us to do something differently. And then we get into a conversation about, let's go back to the voter. That's an opportunity, that's an option that's available to the board after 5 years. So after the first 5 years, if the board sees that the plan needs to be updated or there's a challenge going forward, we need to go out and have a conversation with voters. As I mentioned, and I didn't actually mention, but on one of the slides, the voter is the ultimate and the highest level of accountability, at least in my opinion. So that, in my opinion, will keep us from running into a situation where at the end we're coming back to the voter and having a discussion. The intent is throughout the entirety of the program, we're having a very open discussion with them. The other piece is, how do I address the jurisdictions doing their own thing? Clearly they're independent, so they can do their own thing with or without RTNX, by the way. I think what the regional approach does is it pools resources to address macro level improvements, macro level challenges that we face from a transportation standpoint. What I will suggest to you is the pooling of that resources can also be an efficiency, because we don't have redundant systems throughout the entirety of the region. So in my opinion, the big nugget there is not only the pooling of resources, but also the efficiencies that come along with that.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Let's see, there's a question here about are there plans in RTA Next to increase the frequency of the buses?
So another great question. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is it will depend upon exactly what the final analysis looks like in terms of where those bus routes, how those bus routes, but also it's also the paratransit. So keep in mind that a big chunk of this is also paratransit and dial-a-ride for some of those vulnerable communities that exist out there. So the short answer is yes. But I can't tell you, oh, absolutely, it's going to be increased on this route or on that route. That is yet to be determined. That's part of the process that we go through, not only in terms of the jurisdictional partner, in this case, it'd be the city of Tucson, but also the public feedback to say, look, we need some help in these areas. And because it's a finite resource, there will be an opportunity to say, okay, we will focus on this particular area.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Someone's interested to know about how this plan will increase density, addresses increasing density in the inner suburban ring, such as uptown at Ina and La Jolla.
So as I mentioned in my presentation, the diversity of the plan is really the key here. And because there's very, very diverse needs across the entire of the region. When I think of the urban core, I think of, the kind of the Tucson centric area around the university where it's a much higher density than out in the La Jolla or Ina area. However, keep in mind that there are thousands of plats, thousands of lots that are platted, that are already entitled, that will be coming throughout the entirety of this region. And so as that growth happens, that I'll call it infill, even though it's in the suburban areas, as that occurs, that will change the chemistry. And so what happens is we've done the modeling as Hensu outlined for you. We've done the modeling based on what we know today in terms of the planning and in terms of the growth areas. So when we look at these areas that are just outside of the urban core but are in the suburban area, they're addressed as well. And I think when you start looking at investments up near the Marana, Oro Valley area, you'll see that we have incorporated those pieces and we've incorporated some of those constraints going forward.
And Sue, there's a question for you on the data, and it was, are the travel time analysis take into account people who may change modes? For example, they go from single occupancy vehicle to bicycle or to transit.
Like just the changing mode is actually just in the model we include in the like bike mode as I shared earlier and the trip and the mode share. We have a bike mode, walk, and the school bus and walk and the different just the mode other than like it's the auto mode. So including that and just travel time analysis will be actually just taking into account and how just the people moves as just the improvement of service. For example, if we have just a BRT service and a rapid transit service, and the model will recognize that the new service comes in and we show up that actually just how the behavior changes. But the 2046 model, we include that as the BRT services included.
Okay, thank you. I think a kind of related question for
Mhm.
you is that are there any graphics? So, like in the aggregate, bicycle and pedestrian commuters are healthier and live longer than car commuters. So, is there any graphics that you guys have that capture this in terms of the economic benefit, cost due to improvements, decline in health outcomes from kind of self-propelled versus car commuting?
Yeah, there are multiple different performance measures we can actually build and they're currently actually available as well. And some of them actually just we can share some instead of like just the auto travel time and we can just share, we can prepare those in the transit related travel time and the bike and the travel time. Those could be actually just informative. And in the model, actually, as mentioned earlier, it will actually count all those and the behaviors together. So we can do further analysis, but which is actually and the should be aligned with and the RTA next actually just the guidelines and the like just like the plan and sort of like it's approved by the board.
Do you have any information, just curious, on PAG or at PAG or at RTA Next, showing kind of the health benefits of walking to work or commuting to work by bicycle versus driving alone?
Health benefit and no, actually we don't have, but I'm sure that those benefits are actually based on the travel time improvement and also just having more and like a bike active transportation mode will just give more benefits in the health. And but we have the fundamental data, but that's actually not the and our just the points of the representing our just the model.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. There's some questions and some comments that have concerns about how the citizen groups are structured and that there is, let's see, there are select groups like the realtors who are saying they have a lot of control over the decisions that are going to be made by RTA Next. Can you address this a little bit about how, again, we're going to make sure there's fair representation on the boards
Sure.
and the decisions that are being made by RTA Next?
Sure. So I sort of cheated, Jennifer, while you were chatting. I got onto the chat and I started reading these. If you don't mind, I can address
Yeah,
virtually
please.
all of them if that's okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'm disappointed that anyone in any uh, area, realtors or other, would say they have control or influence here. The reality is, as I mentioned, my bosses are the RTA board of directors. The board of directors are the mayors basically across the entirety of the region, the chair of the Pascua Yaqui tribe, the chair of the Tohono Nation, and the ADOT representative for the board. So I'm not sure where that would come from. That really is almost baffling to me that folks would think they'd have influence. Now, I mean, they can boast over that as mentioned in one of the comments, but clearly, I think that the accountability, as I mentioned, is that citizens group that's appointed by the board, and it is in a very open way, letting the board know how the program is going. So it's kind of like a report card every quarter. So 4 times a year, the board's going to get basically answers to questions around schedule and budget for the entirety of the program. I think that the accountability was a huge question for RTA one. And so I spent a lot of time working with the board to identify how do we codify, how do we memorialize this so that it's not influenced by who's sitting in this chair. Quite frankly, it shouldn't be. It should be open and available to the public so that everyone can see. And this plan, this process that we've identified, I believe does that. And I think I have, we've codified it. It's a part of the plan. It's referenced in the plan as a part of the administrative code. It's available. So if you're interested, we have that language and we can show you where that comes from. I do want to clarify one thing as I read the comments that there was a meeting where apparently Grant Road project was discussed, which by the way is discussed in every meeting we attend for pretty obvious reasons, but that the price tag is $3 billion. That's absolutely false. That's not accurate at all. I mean, think about it. The entirety of this program is 2.67 billion. And so that would not even be enough money to finish Grant Road. But if you look at the plan, if you look at the RTA Next plan, and I mentioned those 7 projects, 2 of which needed additional money, Grant Road was one of them. But if you look at the plan, 36 million comes from the sales tax, basically from RTA Next, and 36 million would come from the regional funding. So the total shortfall that we've identified is about $72 million. Now, if you asked, what's it going to be, what's it going to cost to finish the entirety of the project, it's more than that because we have money from RTA 1. So we collected money that we will be spending on completion of that roadway. But I can tell you it's not $3 billion. It's not even, well, it's not even close to that. It's not even close to a fraction of that. So I wanted to make sure that you were clear on that. And I'm really sorry if you got that from a presentation that we made because that is not accurate information.
Great. Thank you for addressing that. There's a question about how the projects are going to be prioritized in terms of their timing relative to other projects.
So we've sat down. Well, so when you click on the project list, which is the RTA Next plan, you'll see that all of the program or all of the elements, all of the projects are identified in a period, and a period is 5 years. So we broke the entirety of the 20 years down in 5-year increments. And then we took it further, we'll call it the next step of looking at within those 5-year increments, how does the cash flow work? So I can tell you, everybody wants their projects right up front, right? I mean, that makes the most sense for everybody because I want my project. But from a cash flow standpoint, we've said, hey, time out here. Let's develop a game plan for smoothing that investment out over the 20-year period. Now, I will tell you that part of the administrative cost is for debt service as an option. So if we get into the plan and say we're in the 3rd or 4th year, things are going well, we don't see any challenges financially or other, we could go to the open market and bond to move some of those projects that are in the outer years up sooner. But that's not a decision we want to make now. We want to make that decision once we've got our legs under us, we're moving forward, and we've really gone through those quarterly reports. Hate to beat on that, but those quarterly reports are going to be very telling for our ability to demonstrate completion of the plan as outlined. And so if we want to go out to the open market and get a loan, basically sell bonds, then that'll be an option. But I've suggested to the board, let's wait a little while. Let's wait till probably the third, fourth, or even fifth year to see how things have gone, and then we can start talking about moving projects further, or excuse me, moving them up into the program.
Great, thank you. Let's see, there's a few other minor questions, and then we'll wrap up to give Christy a little bit of time before we end here. One of them is, do you foresee any electric vehicle adoption growth in Tucson despite expiring incentives?
Yeah, so that's a policy decision by the jurisdictions. I mean, it really comes from the feds and the state, and then the jurisdictions. We don't necessarily get in the middle of that. I can tell you that that is up in the air across the entirety of the state, just because of the conversations that are happening both at the federal and at the state level. So I can't say for sure what the future might hold on that. I suspect that with the evolution of that technology, quite frankly, I think it will become even more affordable, and will become even a more affordable and a great option for folks to be considering going forward.
Great, thank you, Mike. And I think the last question as we wrap up here is, are transit funds expected to be used for operations like paying for free fares, or is this more about upgrading the entire system, like the mentioned rapid transit?
Okay, I missed that. Can you repeat that? Is that the second to last question?
Yes, second to last, transit
Okay.
funds. Yeah,
I'm gonna address that one and the last one if you're okay with it.
sure.
I just read it down. So the transit funds are specifically for services. And I just heard a presentation the other day, and I think the easiest way to say it is the fare free conversation is separate, obviously related because it's transit, but the fare free conversation happens with or without RTA Next. So there's basically no cost or free bus fares today. There will be with or without RTA Next, and I think that's the important part of that. Um, Let me see here about upgrading the entire system. So again, it's upgrades to the system, but it's really based on service, making sure that the transit service is robust. And the last thing I'll mention on the realtor perceptions came from your own RTA public meeting. Absolutely. We held a meeting, I believe last night at the Tucson office of Tucson Association of Realtors office. They had offered that as a public space. It was a large enough space where we could hold many people. It was not intended to be, hey, we're going to favor those folks or not. And that was just the reason for that. There was nothing else. There's no other hidden meaning there at all.
Great. Thank you for addressing that. And really, Michael and Sue, thank you so much for your time today and helping educate our MAP community on what RTA Next means, the data behind it, and then providing some of the MAP data as perspective on where our region stands today for compared to our peer communities. Thank you. And they're going to sign up. The PEG team's now going to sign off. Christy Street, for the Senior Vice President and CEO of the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, is now going to join us. She is one of the members of a broader coalition that's in support of passing these two propositions. And she's here to answer any questions for our community on why SALC is supporting these propositions. Thank you for joining us today, Christy.
Thanks so much.
You can raise your hand. I will try to, Christy's going to give a brief presentation, then you can raise your hand or you can enter questions into the Q&A session.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I commend everyone for sticking out on the 90-minute discussion. This engagement is important as Pima County must control Pima County's future. And so I'm actually going to be very brief because road speak is not most voters' first language. And while I love that MAP is anchored in data, I think sometimes we need to sort of condense and boil down what we have heard when we go through the data at the extent that we have. And so I really only have 4 key points. My 4 key points are actually the outcome of quantitative research and qualitative research as part of the advocacy. We had to go out and ask people, what do you know? And how do you feel? And where are the blank spots and where are the myths? So 4 key points keep coming up as recurring themes. They're the most popular. They're certainly not the only ones. But as you are considering how to mark your ballot, and ballots will are already in the hands of absentee voters, as I've heard anecdotally, but they are dropping into the mail on February 11th and will be in Pima County voter hands very soon. I would love you to consider these 4 points where we've explained a little bit more of the nuance behind the benefits of RTA and Props 418 and 419. The number one comment and confusion point actually is if RTA next passes, will it result in a tax increase? Absolutely not. We are contributing a half-cent tax every day today for RTA 1. That will be the exact same after Props 418 and 419 pass in March. It does not go up. If voters reject it, we don't really save money. Excuse me. We don't really save money, but we lose buying power. Please excuse me for. As you can tell, I get very passionate about it and lose my voice at the exact wrong time. We really end up losing our buying power and paying our higher costs locally at a later time. It's a little bit like if we quit our job and then our mortgage comes due, eventually we have to come up with funding. We eventually have to get another job. Same is true for letting RTA expire. The need for roads does not go away. The the best funding tool that RTA provides for us actually is eliminated. So point number one, Prop 418 and 419 won't raise your taxes. Point number two, it's the most accountable and efficient use of funds. And RTA really delivers an incredible amount of miles for every dollar that we invest, an incredible amount of our transit system. It's really coupled now in lessons learned from RTA 1, as Mr. Ortega explained, that adds additional oversight and involves less politics. So I think it's really important to tease apart that checks and balances that the RTA structure provides. RTA acts as the bank. The accountability body is those 9 members and the CART combined. And the jurisdictions deliver the projects, but that only happens when the voters actually approve the plan. So that separation of those 3 components of voter approved and cemented plan, the bank being separate from the jurisdictions who actually deliver through their technical managers and through the community folks involved in the CART, that really creates a nice, healthy check and balance that keeps everyone on track. It, of course, is also a result of good administration. I think that Mr. Ortega has ushered in confidence in RTA and the improvements necessary to provide guardrails that inspires public trust, inspires actually better use of our dollars, less debt service, fewer delays. He has absolutely brought in extra policy and efficiency of running the organization that will save us millions as taxpayers. And then the alternative is not cheaper. The patchwork possibilities, if every jurisdiction was able to enact another funding source, it will not be consistent. It will lack the transparency because the individual jurisdictions will have to figure out how to be both the bank, the deliverer, and the planned prioritizers. In some jurisdictions, that's really difficult. In no way does that stitch together in a regional comprehensive plan. And that matters when we go after those federal and state dollars. When we compete regionally for what little available federal and state tax dollars there are for transportation systems, it matters that we are cooperative and smart in the bidding process. Which leads me to point number 3. If Pima County does not invest in ourselves, no one will. We must maintain our own infrastructure. No one will do it for us. No one's coming to our rescue from Phoenix or Washington to really keep us competitive as a region. If we don't do it, we fall behind. And time again, we've talked with voters about why that matters, not just from the fact that good roads and efficient transit drive our economy, but the fact that that really keeps gas in the engine, pun intended, to drive everyone's increased prosperity. That means tourists, that means freight delivery, even for folks who may not drive or ride a transit system, they still need groceries and they still need goods and services delivered to them quickly and efficiently. That also means our students and our workforce as a region, mobility equals opportunity. So that's point number 3. We have to be our own heroes in this story. Point number 4, and my last most commonly talked about component of the advocacy, is that RTA Next, Props 418 and 419, means safer roads for everyone. Safety is not a partisan issue. Safety polls very well, as you can imagine. Everyone in our county wants to commute and to transit across the region, regardless of their zip code or their mode of transportation, safely. So drivers see benefit in this plan, cyclists and pedestrians see benefit in the plan, transit riders, and even those of us who encounter wildlife and have had those hit the brakes moments benefit from this plan. Now, is RTA Next a zero-sum game? Absolutely not. There is no one plan that builds a transportation system for a community of over 1 million residents across more than 9,000 square miles within the county. And so it takes multiple plans layered together in cooperation with many communities. It takes folks who vision urban cores. It takes folks who are growing in our outer regions like Marana and Sarita and Green Valley. It takes folks who are absolutely unable to drive themselves and depend on the services of paratransit and dial-a-ride. It takes all of those folks coming together and creating a cooperative regional approach. And that has polled the highest amongst our likely voters here in Pima County. I'll just wrap up with the fact that the election is a special election. There are only 2 questions on the ballot. Both questions must pass, so you must vote yes twice if you are in favor of this plan. And the last day recommended to mail back ballots is March 3rd. The actual election day is March 10th, and so if you still are holding your ballot after March 3rd, we recommend that you find the in-person ballot drop-off locations to ensure that your vote is counted in time. And with that, I will wrap up. Thanks, Jennifer. Sorry for the coughing fit.
Oh, no, thanks, Christy. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, it's interesting and valuable to hear why an organization like Southern Arizona Leadership Council, among other community members in our community, are supporting RTA Next. If we have any questions for Christy, I know we're right out of time here, but I think if those who want to hang on can stay on a few minutes later and answer some questions, you can enter them in the Q&A box like you did for our PAG representatives, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you and allow you to ask your questions directly. We did have one question. Christy, you may not know the answer to it, and if you don't, that's okay. We'll just reach out to PAG to get a response. But do you know what the total cost of administering the RTA is?
I can tell you that it is statutorily maxed out at 1%. So I want to say that it's in, and I can look it up, but I want to say that it's under $25 million currently budgeted. PAG would have the final answer on that, but I am absolutely positive that it can statutorily not exceed 1% of the overall budget. So I think when we talk about particularly if you compare good administration and the data science behind all of this relative to just debt service, that would cost us way more than 1% if we were to be inefficient in the way that we deliver, even purchasing power across all of these jurisdictions. There are a lot more to gain than the 1% we invest in trustworthy, accountable administration.
Great, thank you, Christy. If there's any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand. If not, we can wrap up today's Map Talk. I thank all of you for joining us in this conversation, information and data from the MAP dashboard on what transportation and infrastructure looks like in our community, and then that discussion from PAG on information on what RTA Next would bring to our region and what the kind of the data and transportation information behind RTA Next, and then Christy's advocacy for supporting it through SALC. This Map Talk is recorded. We will publish it on the MAP dashboard website. It will be available for you to share starting tomorrow afternoon. I'll send an email to all of the attendees and those who signed up for the webinar with a link to that as well as the slides. Have a great afternoon, day, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.